There's something special about a good platformer. You can pick up a controller and just know what to do. Run and jump and get over obstacles to survive until the end of a level. It's a classic formula that has persisted for decades. On the chopping block today is a new retro revival platformer title, Fallen Leaf. It's a game crafted in order to emulate the look and feel of classic NES games. Welcome back to I Dream of Indie Games, and in today's review, we're going to find out whether or not Fallen Leaf falls flat. And if you're enjoying our content, please consider subscribing and liking this video and support us on Patreon. Be sure to also tune into our live streams every Thursday on YouTube or Twitch. Your indie gaming community is waiting for you. Fallen Leaf opens up to a cutscene telling the story of an evil emperor named Xanculos. He's a cruel leader who left his people fearful and without hope. A powerful wizard named Willow fought back against Xanculos and sealed him away, supposedly sacrificing himself in the process. In the present day, we see young treasure hunters Leaf and Petal stumble upon a cave where they find a chest. Eager for the riches inside, Leaf opens up the chest and actually lets out Xanculos. Luckily, Willow himself was also sealed inside and gives us the quest to find a power stone somewhere across the land. It's up to Leaf to comb the world and find this power stone in order to use its abilities to stop Xanculos. It's a straightforward story that seems to be self-aware. It's emulating the 8-bit days before games could essentially have these multiple full-length movies as cutscenes in order to help tell the story. Fallen Leaf tells its story very well. Characters in the world are built out through minor dialogue and cutscenes, but mostly through the levels and gameplay themselves. Along the way, we do come across side stories from other characters. We meet some folks who supposedly had their stuff stolen from Willow or were also sealed away themselves. We meet a race of beanstalk creatures who need to be rescued and brought back home. It can be quirky and witty at points, but also hard-hitting enough when it needs to be. Fallen Leaf is a 2D action platform. You'll be running through linear levels littered with enemies and hazards. You'll be shooting enemies with the power from Leaf's magic glove, or use his various magic items as weapons. Within levels, you can find secrets if you do some minor exploring, eventually finding some side collectibles or extra money, though these secrets never require too much branching from the main linear level structure. Levels are short and to the point, but they are very well designed as a result. While levels are linear, the overall game isn't. On the overworld, you can loop back to old areas and replay them to find secrets or go to various towns to complete side objectives. You see, at the end of a level, Leaf will be opening a chest sealed by Willow as he tries to complete his quest to find this power stone. Most of these chests will just be random items, however. Some NPCs in the towns will want one of these items, but they won't be tasking you directly with finding them. Instead, when you talk to them, they may lament about how they missed their old clock or are looking for someone's phone number. So if you make note of this, you can actually loop back around to these towns and give the NPCs these items, which will often yield a powerful reward, something like a heart container, for example. You'll also be collecting these beanstalk guys, which, when you bring them to the mother stalk, it may help the mother stalk grow, which will give you new abilities and magic weapons as it does. Towns also have shops where you can buy magic upgrades or healing items. The game has a decent enough difficulty balance. You'll never be overwhelmed by the number of enemies on the screen. Challenge mostly comes from platforming and clever enemy placement. However, because the game emulates the NES era, some of the physics authentically feel very of the era as well. So that means jumps are very tight. Most of the time, you won't be able to maneuver yourself mid-jump in the air like many modern platformers. But you also don't gain momentum like in Mario, so there's no running or long jump. Instead, platforming feels more similar to something like Mega Man or Castlevania in that you jump basically straight up and down and progress somewhat slowly by foot. I've actually died quite a few times in the game because of these jumping mechanics or an inability to move quicker and dodge attacks. But the game is designed around this, so I wouldn't call it bad. It just isn't my preference to have this style of platforming in the game. You'll also come across bosses along the way, which serve as their own stage. Bosses can be fun, but overall the fights are pretty repetitive. They don't seem to have multiple phases and basically just repeat the same attacks for the duration of the fight, making the battles feel like an endurance test, so to speak. This ultimately makes pattern detection pretty easy. The challenge, for me anyways, mostly came from the size of the battle area. area. You're often fighting bosses in cramped spaces, which makes dodging hard. So it's not bad, these fights aren't bad, they're just really not as exciting as the main levels were. Along the way in the game, you'll also collect magic weapons, which you can freely switch in order to use various weapons, but you'll also be coming across alternate characters. Leaf's sister, Petal, eventually joins us. She has a flying bee friend that will fire an extra projectile at enemies, which in theory would help, but the downside is she moves more slippery. Ultimately, I never really found Petal to be of use or any better than Leaf himself, so I rarely played as her and just stuck with Leaf, but it is nice to have the option to change characters. I just don't think there was anything specific about Petal that made her useful or require her use. The game's look is very inspired by the 8-bit days. Graphics look on point right down to simulating a limited color palette, but I don't actually think this could run on an NES. Fallen Leaf has a wonderful art style that reminds me of a cartoon. Think something like Adventure Time or Over the Garden Wall. Detail is packed everywhere, from little birds populating the world to seeing enemies stalk you in the background of levels. Colors pop and characters, while sprite-based, actually have expressions. Likewise, the game sounds very of the era as well. There's punchy chiptunes during action moments, or more happy folk chiptune ballads when in towns. The game sounds absolutely lovely. This has some of the best music I've ever heard in a game, and I'm not exaggerating. A lot of the time, it actually reminds me of my favorite band, which is Anna Managuchi for those interested. It sounds like the game has a track for each level, and each new song sounds unique, but each song also fits into an overarching music style that ties it all together in the end. So Fallen Leaf was a joy to play. The game takes you through multiple linear levels that are tightly and smartly designed, but the game allows you to progress non-linearly overall. It has an effective story, even if it isn't a grand, hard-hitting story, but most importantly, the game is fun and easy to pick up and understand. It's something special when the tutorial is mainly a full level rather than a walkthrough that tells you exactly what you need to do with constant reminders of what buttons to press. The game just lets you play, and honestly, I had a blast just doing that. Ultimately, I'm awarding Fallen Leaf the Silver Genie Lamp of approval.